yes, it's Baseball Things. Here's Jason A. Churchill.
Baseball Things, Jason Churchill. Big show today as spring training is underway for most of the league by now, at least with pitchers and catchers reporting. A big trade to talk about went down last week, a rule change or two being discussed, and to get all the wrong answers to all of those inquiries, I thought we'd bring in a friend of the show, former MLB Scout, founder and CEO of Program 15 Baseball, president of baseball operations for Future Star Series, analyst at KHOU, CBS TV in Houston, co-host of Extra Bases podcast with Jason Bristol. It's Jeremy Booth. First off, Jeremy, stop adding titles because it's getting ridiculous. And second, thank you for setting aside a little time to talk to the listeners. Yeah.
Program 17. What's Program 17?
I'll add Program 17,
okay.
And maybe we should tell that story because the listeners are not going to understand that. But
keep dancing. You keep dancing.
But before we dive into all the good stuff, maybe remind the listeners in general at least, and inform those who don't know at all, what you and your staff actually do at Program 15 Future Star Series. What is that? People hear that and they're like, I have no idea what that is.
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for having me back, man. I always love talking baseball with you, and I love the way we go back and forth on social media. And I got to tell you, it's one of the best parts of my day sometimes is messing with you. So it's beautiful. What I will say is, Program 15 is the global player development and identification group of New Balance Baseball. And that group is comprised purely of major league professionals, guys who have signed anywhere from Edwin Diaz, right, to David Price, other major leaguers, and of course won World Series rings as players and coaches and scouts. Together, we comprise the group that backs the Future Star Series, and that is the events that New Balance Baseball runs, across the earth, and that's what that comprises. So, partnerships and growth and individual player and team and all of this designed to give a better product and better return with financial responsibility and growth back to the family, right? We want to make sure that we're strengthening communities and we are getting to players that can't afford all of this stuff, and we are doing everything we can to give back to players and help generate the next wave of stars. So it's been quite gratifying. It's been challenging, but that's essentially what we do.
I think maybe that's the separator for me as I look at what you do and how you describe it and how you guys, kind of market yourselves, present yourselves digitally on social media and things of that nature. The difference maker is what you ended with there in being a lot more inclusive, because I think of other showcases, and I won't name them, but I think most people out there know what they are. It comes across as a money grab, and I'm not going to ask you to tear down anybody else, but to me that seems to be the biggest difference is that you're trying to make sure everybody has that opportunity to be seen, to be scouted, to develop as a young player at 15, 16, 17 years old and not miss out because of money.
Yeah, we're trying to make finance is not an issue, right? Mm-hmm. We're trying to get to players regardless of financial status. I mean, $10 million or $10. We want to make sure that we're giving game, which, by the way, beyond the major league component, has a college component and certainly a future scout and coach and executive component. And last but certainly not least, our game teaches so many things about resiliency and growth and teamwork and the next generation of broadcasters and writers and doctors and lawyers. And so all that has to do with this global game. And that's the mission, is to develop better people and to keep people strengthening communities and strengthening the country.
Makes it really easy to support. All right, let's get to it. We'll start out Major League Baseball. One of the big topics in the game right now, and that's the freeze, so to speak, in free agency. The two biggest names in Bryce Harper, Manny Machado, they're both still out there. Dallas Keuchel, Craig Kimbrell, also still available. First of all, I'm not one to simply throw this on teams and say pay the players. It's a two-way street. It's a free market, not a kind of a name your price market, as I said on Twitter recently. And teams should not be expected to just go, okay, Bryce Harper, if you want 10 and 400, here you go. But I guess there's two questions here. The first one being, what exactly is the holdup? And number two, how do we fix it? What's happening right now in Major League Baseball free agency from your perspective?
It's hard to say, and it's hard to say because you really want to believe that on both sides there's reasons why we are where we are, but you can't deny the fact that we're not in a good place, and we're just not. I mean, you have guys like taking Harper and Machado completely out of this for a second, because those are the superstars. Those are the guys everybody wants to see large landmark deals, and And that seems to be the trend every time there's one of these guys come up, right? They're unique cases, and they're always going to be unique cases. But you have a long list of guys behind that don't have jobs right now, that have earned jobs, that have earned their money, that numbers bear out that they should be getting more than they're being offered. And you're headed to a situation where people who have proven themselves at the major league level are not being given opportunities to play at the major league level for what they've now earned financially. It's not. It doesn't matter how you slice it. It doesn't matter what you cut. To me, that's happening now. On the other side of it, you have ownership who is looking at this differently. You have ownership who has seen a bunch of 10-year contracts not work out. You have people who are saddled with tens of millions of dollars, in some cases hundreds of millions of dollars, that look like a bad investment. And so there's going to be some fear, and rightfully so, of what that'll turn into. I think one side's being a little bit, myopic, and the other side's being a little bit stubborn, frankly. And I think that you're going to have to give a little bit to get. My biggest fear is that this is going to continue to snowball. Look, you're looking at Bryce Harper and Machado, to go back to that. They're 26 years old?
Yep.
They're in their prime. A 10-year contract for those two doesn't look as bad as a 10-year contract at the age of 31. And I don't think that anybody, when just asked on those merits, the athletic prime is what you're buying out, would disagree with that. Now, the money, we're talking about a fair share of entertainment dollar. And if you look at the revenues that MLB is getting involved in, it's increasing. The parity, the way that the game is played across baseball seems to be the we're all in or we're all out type of model right now. You don't have teams that are competing to just try to get into that second level wild card. Well, maybe you have one or two, but for by and large, you're the in or you're out, right? I personally think, and I'm going on record right now with you and you only, that I think that the players, the superstars of Machado and Harper, get what they get. And I wouldn't be fighting that too much because Bryce Harper, Manny Machado can change your organization in several ways, not the least of which is want to make other players want to play there for less money.
Sure.
I'm not – those two are going to get what they're going to get. But the Dallas Keuchels and the Marwin Gonzalez's and the players that should be overvalued a little bit in today's market seem to be getting shut out as well. And that's your bigger problem, right? Your bigger problem isn't the two guys in the class who are going to go get really paid. No matter what they're talking about, they're going to get really paid. Maybe it's not everything they want, but they're going to get really paid. The problem is your next tier. Your problem is your guys that really – have earned that money, who pitched on team-friendly contracts, who now have a chance to take that prime of their life and capitalize on their share of the entertainment dollar, because this game is entertainment. If it's not entertainment, we're not talking about it.
Right.
It's entertainment.
Let me play devil's advocate for a second. Let's stick with Harper and Machado just for a second, because those are the guys that are going to get it 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 years unless they, find it, in their best interest to sign a shorter deal and come back at this in a year or two, which I don't think is happening. But let's just stick there. Okay. If you're an owner, and because this is what I've been told, and these are the whispers that I'm hearing, owners are using the Alex Rodriguez contract to compare to Bryce Harper and Manny Machado, which is fair. Alex was 25, one of the best free agents, if not the best free agent of all time. He got $252 million from the Texas Rangers, and the Rangers had to trade him. In the owner's eyes, that did not work out for the Texas Rangers. They did not win with him. And they didn't win because of the trade that they made to get rid of him. So the owners are using that to say, hey, no, this didn't work out. The Marlins gave Giancarlo Stanton over $300 million. And then they had to trade him. And you know what? They're not going to win because of that trade either. And they certainly didn't win with him. So where is the evidence that these deals actually work out? Because and while there's a lot of players out there and agents blaming analytics, all the stat nerds out there will tell you Bryce Harper will be worth $400 million over the next 10 years. But it's not in a vacuum. So to play devil's advocate there, where is the incentive for the White Sox or the Padres or even the Nationals or the Yankees or whoever it might be to go ahead and just say, fine, Bryce Harper, here's 10 years at $40 million per?
So I can't argue that when it comes to Alex and Giancarlo Stanton. I can't argue that. But we're also talking about markets with owners who didn't want to go beyond those contracts. They wanted to pay those guys what they were going to get, and everything else around that had to fit into a budget where they still were taking home their bottom line. Okay? So if you're not going to spend around those contracts, and I get it, they don't make a ton of sense. It doesn't make a ton of sense for a San Diego, even though that's a fit that I personally like, truthfully. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense for a team like the White Sox, if they're not, even though they're in on both guys, if they're not going to go further, way further beyond to supplement, they're still just one player. They're organizational changing players, but you can't stop at one contract. Seattle Mariners paid Robinson Cano, who at the time was one of the best hitters in the game. Mm-hmm. How'd that work? I was there when we did it. How'd that work? Right? It's just sometimes these things don't work if you're not prepared to add around that. So while you're talking about Bryce Harper and we're talking about Machado, and yes, and I'm not blaming analytics at all, by the way, because anybody who looks at these numbers is going to say, pay these guys. Right? You're talking about owners not willing to go beyond that. In today's day and age, their TV contracts are bigger than Alex Rodriguez than when he was signed. Sure. There's stuff in Vegas going on that I still can't fathom why we would do that as an industry. But where there's more revenue share potentially coming back in, you have different revenue streams that you didn't have when A-Rod went through this at 26 years old. So for me, if you're an owner and the prices are up and you're doing this type of stuff and you're involved in the different revenue streams that create a Major League Baseball team, why would you pay one player if you're just going to pay one player? You need to pay a bunch of guys around that to build and go win for the next 10 years and make your money back.
Right. And I think what this comes back to is, and again, can owners afford it? Yes. Does it fit a lot of these clubs' revenue model that's really built for them for the most part outside of their own markets by Major League Baseball? Are you telling me that the White Sox can afford, and this is rhetorical, but if you're telling me the White Sox can afford to give Bryce Harper the $350, $400 million and then go out in a year and give Garrett Cole $200, I mean, that's just not true. You know what I mean? Like, can the owner afford it? Yes, but I can also afford a Mercedes, Jeremy, and I'm not going to do it because that's going to make it more difficult for me to do everything else that I'm trying to do in life. It's not that different for a baseball team. And I think the problem comes down to here is the luxury tax is, yes, it's an excuse, but to some clubs it's a deterrent because there's baseball revenue and what I can make from baseball and money that's mine. And owners aren't looking at this like I'm the owner of the White Sox and that's what I am. They're looking at it as I'm a billionaire and one of the things that I do is own the White Sox. So, to get them to spend more money, I raise the luxury tax. Stop penalizing teams, especially mid to smaller market teams, for going over the luxury tax. Because you know what? I'm here in Seattle. There's no chance that John Stanton is going over the luxury tax as the owner of the Seattle Mariners unless doing so puts them over the top as World Series favorites. There's no way they're going to do it because it's not a smart, quote-unquote, business decision. So maybe the luxury tax that the owners are actually using as an excuse needs to be part of the next CBA. It either needs to go up or it needs to go away. And I understand that creates problems because the owners wanted it there to begin with, but they're using it as an excuse right now. And I think the only way to get some of these middle market teams, the Milwaukees and the Minnesotas, to be consistent spenders is take away the penalty for spending. It reminds me of the draft pick compensation for signing free agents. Well, you want the Twins to get better, right? They're getting high draft picks. Stop penalizing them for signing good free agents. I think that's kind of what we're getting to here. And you know, when a guy like Bryce Harper or Manny Machado is out there and you kind of eliminate the Yankees, which is so far, is kind of what's going on. I mean, we always want to point to the Yankees, but that luxury tax matters to them to some level. They've proven that over the last 5 years. Whether it should or not is not the story here. It does. Maybe the luxury tax has to go.
The luxury tax is acting as a salary cap. Mm-hmm. That's basically what you just said, right? It's a salary cap. We don't want to go over it because we don't want to pay. And I can't argue. And this is where I'll take the owner side. I can't argue not wanting to spend extra tax dollars unless it's going to get a World Series championship. I'm totally with you. But for every Bryce Harper you pay, keep in mind, you can't pay 7 of them. Sure. You pay 1, maybe. But if you pay 1, depending on your market, depending on your revenue models, all those things considered, if you pay 1, you don't have to pay the rest of them like that. What you need to do is pay people around that are proven free agents at dollars that make sense. If you're Dallas Keuchel, who I'm a huge fan of, who personally, if I was him, I'd have stayed in Houston. Nothing saying he doesn't come back to Texas and nothing saying that he doesn't go somewhere else. But if I'm Dallas Keuchel and I'm looking at 5 and 75, and that's my deal, right? It's $15 million a year. Well, Bryce Harper just got 30. I'm going to go win a couple World Series, and I still got paid 5 and 75. The Players Union can't expect everybody to make $400 million, and they can't expect every free agent to break the bank every time around. What they can expect is that owners are still businessmen and are going to do what's right for their business, and baseball is a business. Okay? I'm not going anywhere near what Bill James said a while ago about players being replaceable, because everybody in baseball is replaceable. Everybody. Sure. Nobody's going to the ballpark to watch the Ushers.
Oh, come on.
Nobody's going to the ballpark, right?
And while they are replaceable, you can't just replace tomorrow or next year Manny Machado and Bryce Harper. It's going to take 10 years. I mean, look how long it took to get even a Manny Machado or Bryce Harper or Mike Trout. Let's use Mike Trout since A-Rod and Ken Griffey Jr. and Barry Bonds. I mean, it takes half a generation, sometimes longer, to actually get that kind of player. And I think maybe that's the difference here. These aren't just really good players. Manny Machado and Bryce Harper, assuming health, that they're healthy, these are 5 to 10 win players on a yearly basis that are in their prime right now. Yeah, I think that's the difference.
We're also talking about clubhouse chemistry. You're talking about, at this point, guys going to camp late. You're talking about losing reps. You're talking about building. People say, oh, you can do it at home. It's not the same. It's not the same. You need to be in camp. You need to be with your club. You need to be around your teammates, especially if you're changing environments, right? You need to be in a situation where you can grow into that season and hit the ground running with a contract that's no doubt going to be bigger than anybody else on your ball club, and time that you don't hit your home city not playing well, because that isn't going to go well either. Okay, I look back at this situation, I look back at a guy that was a former teammate of mine, and I think of J.D. Drew. All right, now J.D. Drew in 1997 was the second pick in the draft by the Philadelphia Phillies. Sounds innocuous enough. Gets offered a contract. I believe there was a major league deal in there, several $1 million. Okay, great, right? What happened? He did not sign. What happened the year before, however, was loophole free agents were found in the 1996 draft, and that was Matt White, Travis Lee, Bobby C., and John Patterson. And anybody listening may or may not remember that. Jason, I know you do. People may not remember that. And what that did was, at the time, Major League clubs had to tender a contract within 2 weeks of drafting the player, okay, to keep their rights to the player. Scott Boras was involved in a couple of those deals, and you know what? He knew the loophole, and he saw it, and they didn't give contracts because nobody really ever did it. And guess what? All 4 players were made free agents by the commissioner's office, all of them. All right? They all got a ton of money. Travis Lee got $10 million. Matt White got $10 million. I want to say John Patterson got 6, and Bobby C. was somewhere in the 4 range. And at the time, that was unheard of. And what he did was said, hey, you know what? These guys are free agents, and everybody can bid on these amateurs. This is what they're worth. And the draft changes were made. Right? Later on, that was you could no longer offer major league contracts to people. That's where that started, was back in the 90s. Why am I bringing that up? Because J.D. Drew sat out. Next year signed with the Cardinals as the 5th pick in the draft. Showed up in St. Louis at the end of the year. That was 1998 during the home run chase, and went largely unnoticed until the next year when he shows up in Philadelphia and they're throwing batteries at him from left field. Okay? These players are going to need to get into camp, and these owners need to stop being so stubborn with franchise-changing people and understand who they can put around them, which is why I go back to the second tier. So Manny Machado and Bryce Harper have a decision to make. Are they going to be poster child for the next generation? Because you know what? When that CBA comes up, this is going to be a point people remember. All right? These 26-year-old people who are game-changing talents, who are once-in-a-generation talents, right, are now sitting without a job on February 13th. That's a problem, and I don't quite know what the answer is to fix it. What I do know is that neither side has taken the right approach.
One of the complaints is not enough, and they might be right, and a lot of this is coming from players, which I think is a terrible look. I don't think Justin Verlander should be speaking out on this thing. I don't think Sean Doolittle should be speaking out publicly on this sort of thing, because it just looks like they're whining for more money. And while that's not necessarily what they mean, there are a lot of fans that are like, shut up, you got a 5-year deal as a relief pitcher and you're making $25 million. Just shut up. Like, what are you complaining about? I make $40,000 and I work more hours. I mean, that's the response, the kind of response some of them are getting. So it's a bad look. But incentivizing teams to compete more often and to kind of not sit in mediocrity, or, in the case of some clubs where they're just at the bottom of the league for a while as they look for this perfect moment to strike. Incentivizing clubs to try to win now might be part of the answer, because you're talking about the Mike Moustakases and the Marwin Gonzaleses of the world also being out there as free agents, but like the big 8 or 10 clubs that pretty much compete every year, or at least as we look at it right now, the Dodgers and the Nats and the Yankees and the Red Sox and the Indians and the Astros. I mean, those are the top teams that are competing every year. Cardinals and Cubs. Every single year. You can't always expect those clubs to be the ones that signs every free agent. It's not just the top guys. What are the Yankees going to do with Marwin Gonzalez at this point? What are the Red Sox going to do with Marwin Gonzalez? They don't need that guy. So that means that the Twins and the Brewers and the Reds and the Braves of the world, the clubs that aren't in huge markets, that don't have the ability to just go up to $200 million in their payroll and beyond. Because again, we're talking about GMs here, not just owners. There isn't the incentive to just go say, hey, Marwin Gonzalez, we know you can do a lot of things. You can hit a little bit. You have a little power. You're still in the middle of your prime. Here's $50 million. Like, what is the incentive for a club that with Marwin Gonzalez, for example, probably only projects at 80 to 85 wins? There's no incentive there. Why would I do this? It's just a waste of $50 million. I'm doing it so I can go from 79 to 84 wins. Like, that never makes any sense. So maybe one of the answers here is, and I'm one of those, Jeremy, that hates the one-game wildcard playoffs, so this is really easy for me to say. Maybe just expanding the playoffs is the answer and making that playoff series more of a reward. The Oakland A's had a great year last year, caught fire in June, stayed hot to the end of the season, shocked everybody, won 97 games, and yet they were still the number 2 wild card, and they got one playoff game, and it wasn't even at home, and they didn't even get an opportunity to use a starting pitcher because they needed to go through the end of the season and win enough games to clinch a wild card spot. Like, that cannot be ideal in terms of trying to get teams to be more competitive and incentivizing them to win. There has to be something else we can do.
Yeah, and they're going to have to get through that. I mean, look, the Players Union is looking at this, and I'm just trying to take, the view on both sides. The Players Union is looking at this as, how do we get our players the fair share? That's the whole point. Fair share of the entertainment dollar, right? How do we keep our players' rights intact? And the commissioner's office, check that. The clubs, who the commissioner works for, are looking at this in a way that we've already laid out. Okay, I agree. It doesn't necessarily help that guys get on Twitter and start fighting with fans. It's not going to get guys on your side that way, right? You're not going to get public sentiment on your side. However, they're frustrated, and they're frustrated because every generation of players has passed it down to the next group in a better position than when they left it, and this seems to be some pretty serious resistance. Okay, I was in college in 1994 when we had the first work stoppage, or not the first, but the most recent one, right? And I remember what those guys felt, what they were going through. None of those guys were crying at the time over money they weren't making. That was not the sentiment. The sentiment was always about, we're a fraternity, we're in the 1% of people who can do this. The owners are printing this money. We just need our part of it, because without us, there's no game. And remember what happened that year, Jason? We had people try to cross lines, right? Yep. And how well did that go over?
Yeah, not well. Kevin Millar was one of them. Yeah,
he was one of them. But outside of him, right? It didn't go well. Fans didn't want to see it. People didn't want to go, and the owners lost a ton of money. And what did they end up doing?
No, they caved.
They caved. The reality is, the owners can be business owners all you want, but if you don't have people to work for you, especially in the entertainment industry, you don't have people on the field that people are paying tons of money today to go see, right? Well, you know what? You're going to get a whole lot of nothing in your pocket.
So let's just make this an NFL-style playoff. Let's incentivize these teams a little bit more, a little bit further. Ultimately, Major League Baseball is going to get to 32 teams in the next 10 or 15 years anyway. Portland might actually be one of those. We might be talking about Montreal or somebody like that, but we're probably going to get to 32 in the next 10 to 15 years. So if you go to 12, 5 teams making now, 2 wild cards, 3 division winners in each league, make it 6 in each league, 12 overall. That's 3 division winners. The next 3 best records in each league get in. You obviously sorted by win-loss percentage. The wild card round of the playoffs, it plays against the 6 seed. It's 6 seed versus 3. It's the NFL style playoffs. Then all of a sudden you have that much more. Last year, that would have meant Tampa also getting into the postseason. It would have meant more playoff games. Now, if you're the Players Union, and from that perspective, I guess this is where the argument is. If you're the Players Union, are you good with that? Or is that something you're like, well, we're going to need something big in return for that? Or is that like, yeah, cool, because this gives the players in general that much better chance to get to the postseason. They're going to play more postseason games. Or does it come down to the whole, wait, you're asking me to work more? That's the one thing that I think, somebody such as myself, somebody that doesn't work in a game, not a player, not an agent, don't work for a club. I don't know the sense of, what the Players Union might think about something like that versus what the owners might think. The owners are probably going to love it in terms of, yeah, more games, that's more gates for us. But with the Players Union?
I don't think the players need any more incentivizing. I think the clubs need incentivizing, which I think is where you're going with that, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So there's something that was talked about on about potential rule changes where draft positions would effectively be flipped, right? So teams that were punting would be penalized. Okay, that was kind of the sentiment with that. I don't know if that's the answer, but guess what? That's on the right track. it's on the right track, because you don't want these teams you want teams to try to win games. You want cities to be involved, which is basically what you're saying, whether it's playoffs or not. You want more cities to be involved. You want more fans in the seats. Yep. You want more parity. You want games that matter.
Because as much as we hate the wild, I'm not sure if you dislike it as much as I do. As much as I hate that one gamer with the second wild card, the one thing it has done, it has just exactly what you're talking about. It has kept more cities, more markets involved further along into the season, instead of, well, we punted on July 31st and traded everybody, the season is over. That was killing teams, and it's obviously helped. I just think they need to take it another step further.
I don't disagree. That could be the answer. What I do know is that I think the club needs to be incentivized. More clubs need to be incentivized for winning games, even if you don't get into the playoffs, right? Because I think that is probably along the right track. That's going to solve the salary problem, because they're going to go out and sign players who's going to want to win. It's going to solve revenues, because this is what's going to happen with more games that matter. People buy more tickets. Sure. People buy more concessions. People buy more souvenirs, and revenues go up, right? So the more you can create an environment that still rewards the people that advance into the playoffs in the postseason appropriately, without watering it down too much so everybody gets in, right? You still have incentives along the way that clubs get for winning games, being competitive instead of punting. To be honest with you, if you look at the Mariners and those incentives were in place, how much better do they do over the last 10 years?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I got a little thing on Twitter the other day about how Robinson Cano contract really didn't make the Mariners any money, but it did, because he's the reason they got Nelson Cruz, and he was a big reason how they stayed in the races these past, 4 of 6 years or 4 of 7 years, rather than just fading away into oblivion. People were going to the ballpark last summer here in Seattle. I'm sitting in the studio at the office, less than 1,000 or less than 2,000 feet from T-Mobile Park. And massive people were going to games in August. It's been a while since we could say that. And that's only happened 2 or 3 times in the last 15 or 18 years. And you're right, spending that money on Cruz, keeping Felix around, on Robinson Cano, absolutely did a lot of things on the positive side for the Seattle Mariners. But and they saw enough in that. But other teams don't. Other teams are, I don't know, maybe the Reds is a good example. What have the Padres done other than giving Eric Hosmer way too much money to kind of show that, hey, you know what, we're actually trying to win? Like, A.J. Preller gets there, makes tons of moves, and it's been all about their farm system for the entire time that he's been there. They've been awful the entire time. But what would tell that owner and what would tell that GM, yeah, it's time to go spend money? How about the idea that no matter how bad you were last year, getting into the postseason this year and doing meaningful damage is a very distinct possibility? Because if you had the extra wild card in each league right now, look back to last year and the year before, how many wins it would take to get there. There would be times where 82, 84, 85, 86 wins is getting you that added wild card, because that's happened with the second wild card. So it's pretty incredible how many more additional teams would stay in it that much longer if there was another spot. I don't know of any other answer, so I'm kind of stuck on that one at this point, Jeremy, but I just love the idea of just the reward being more than one game and there being more teams involved in it. Because I actually feel bad for the Oakland A's. They played so well last year, and things didn't roll their way. They lost Sean Manaea late in the year, so they didn't really get they used the bullpen to pitch in that wild card game against the Yankees. Didn't really get to roll out one of their starters, and then their season was over because they ran into a significantly better team. One game. I mean, that baseball's never really been about one game. In the postseason, and now we're running out this one-game wild card. So maybe this is just more me trying to get rid of that one-game wild card more than anything else. I just see tons of value in that. I do think you're right there. Something's wrong. This is not good for the game, and something's got to, and something's ultimately going to change.
But what it's creating also with fans, instead of identifying with their superstars and what it's like, and being part of these cities and environments, right? It's creating resentment. You're seeing this on Twitter. You're seeing fans begin to resent these players and take ownership side because the average fan isn't making $10 million a year.
Sure.
The average fan isn't making $500,000. The average fan in this country isn't doing that, right? So for them, hey man, you're making $5 million, play a game.
Yeah. And in the end, they would. If you went to and again, I'm the one that outwardly complained about Justin Verlander and Sean Doolittle. But if you told those guys you can either go dig ditches or become a lawyer or whatever, or you can play this game for 10% of what you're making now, they'd be like, cool, I guess I'm making 10% of what I'm making now. So 100%. they would admit that outwardly. I'm not trying to drag down those players, but you're right. Yeah, there's already a disconnect between those two sides.
Look at what you just said about the fans in Seattle. And look, Seattle is a town that daily, honestly, man, I miss the fan culture up there. I miss the baseball people. It was outstanding to be a part of that community for the years I was there from a baseball standpoint. It just really was, okay? However, everything you just said about Robinson Cano and fans going to the ballpark in August and Nelson Cruz and creating that community, we just talked about that with signing Bryce Harper and then going to get other players to complement and paying them some money, right? The Mariners never got over the hump. They didn't go over there with that. Haven't done it with Jerry yet, and they didn't do it with Jack, and it's been a while because they've really gotten over that. But what I will say is the effort was put into a point. Maybe the additional rewards would have helped John Stanton or previous ownership go further. Maybe it would have. Maybe it wouldn't. What we do know is that winning baseball keeps fans happy, and identifying with their players and their superstars, and for the young players coming up, right, in some cases, they're sports heroes. I hesitate to use the word heroes because there's real heroes out there that don't wear baseball uniforms, right? But they're sports heroes, things they identify with and aspire to be. And these type of things hurt the game. They hurt the game. And so they need to fix this. They need to get players into camp, and they need to have a different perspective because the rest of the world is watching. And to be honest with you, we all want to watch really good baseball.
Yeah, we do.
So let's get that going.
That's the whole point. All right, we'll move on here a little bit. Good conversation there. One of the other things being discussed at this point with Major League Baseball, its clubs, the Players Union, among some other things like pitch clocks and things like that, which are annoying, but it's certainly not going to drive me away from the game. I've seen it at the minor league level, and it's really been a non-issue. So I imagine if they do that in the big leagues, whatever. But the DH to the NL is one of those really strange. I mean, this could be a very short discussion here because if you sit where I do, I don't want to watch pitchers hit. And I certainly don't watch the games. I've never watched a baseball game, Jeremy, ever in my entire life for the reason of strategy by the manager with double switches, because that's what NL folks that are traditionalists, they're purists, they don't want the DH in the NL. There are some out there. I mean, I think the majority wants the DH in the NL because they want to see Edwin Encarnacion hit instead of even the best hitting pitchers, the Madison Bumgarners and the Edwin Encarnacions and the Bartolo Colon adventure and things of that nature. But there is a faction of folks out there that are just like, no. Baseball is crap when there's a DH, and to be honest with you, I just don't understand it. I don't know what they're watching, and I'm not really sure what they're expecting out of watching baseball.
Madison Bumgarner notwithstanding, what's that old TV or commercial that Glavine and Maddox did years ago, right? About digging the long ball.
Yep.
Man, I gotta tell you, I don't want to see pitchers hit. For what? You guys want to? I mean, that's when you bunt.
Yeah, exactly. You want more bunts?
I don't want to see those guys hit. The DH in the National League creates equity between the two leagues, like they had before the DH entered the American League, right? And I don't have any problem with equity between the two leagues because it creates an extra job, first of all, right? It's more exciting baseball in theory. And it allows pitchers to focus on what they do, which is pitch and throw baseballs. So, for me, I'm all for it. I think they should have done it years ago. I never understood why one league had it and the other one didn't. I never really questioned it, truthfully, but I never got why that was the case.
Right.
And in the minor leagues, right? In the minor leagues, you get to a certain level, and now the home park, if you're an American League club, has DH, and pitchers don't have to hit. And on the road, they don't. It's the other way around. So, you know what? DH to the National League, DH to all levels of minor leagues, DH to all the independent leagues. Pick one. Just DH needs to go everywhere. It doesn't need to just be in the American League, and that's the rule changes they've proposed. That's a no-brainer.
There's like Ronnie Lott said years ago on a local radio station here. There's been a DH in the NFL for 30 years. One of my favorite Ronnie Lott quotes of all time. If that guy could hit. Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's really that simple, and I think some of those folks will just get used to it. It is better baseball. And I think one of the things that's not being talked about a whole lot, that's not being used as ammo in favor of the DH. The DH isn't just this big bumbling fool anymore that can't play. A lot of managers and a lot of clubs see the value in using the DH as a way to kind of rotate players that can play positions, but just keep everybody fresh. It's a long season. It's a 6 months long season after a spring training, after an off season of workouts. It's a very grueling work schedule these guys go through. And it's a way to keep guys fresh. So guys like Chris Bryant at the end of the year aren't necessarily dragging. I mean, you don't want to see that. I want to see Bryce Harper fresh and ready to go for the postseason and down the stretch in September. I think that's one of the aspects that isn't talked about a whole lot with the DH. Yes, DH to the NHL, or excuse me, the NL, the DH to the NHL. See, I'm on the whole NFL thing, and DH.
Man, as long as you got somebody else that can hit, we're good.
Right? Yeah, you got to hit. Offense is where it's at. All right, let's move on a little bit. There was a big trade last week, or earlier this week. What day is it? I don't know. The Phillies and the Marlins finally hooked up on a JT Realmuto trade. There are Phillies fans, and I know one personally, that hates the idea that they gave up the package they gave up to get JT Realmuto. The deal was Will Stewart, Sixto Sanchez, and Jorge Alfaro, the Phillies catcher last year, for JT Realmuto. Now, I think this was a fair deal. I think this is just the cost for a player of that caliber, and people are looking at the numbers. There's some folks out there that are like, yeah, but he doesn't hit 30 home runs. He doesn't hit 340. He doesn't put up a 420 on base versus. I don't understand it. For me, Jeremy, the end of the story is the guy's a catcher and a good one, and that's it. That's all you need to know. You look at those numbers and then tell me he's a catcher and a good one, I'm in.
The hang-up's got to be Sanchez. That's the one that people got to be hurting
for the most
right?
part. Yeah, for the most part.
And you know what? I get the pain in one respect, but I will say it as many times as possible, and I will agree with you once again. Surprise, surprise. The guy is a catcher. He's one of the best in baseball. Those are extremely hard to develop, and he fits in with the win now philosophy the Phillies are going for. You have a chance by getting that player to not only maybe sign him long term, but you also have a chance to go get other players around him. And the Phillies went into the offseason saying, you know what? We're going to spend a ridiculous amount of money. Right? We're going to spend money. Why? Because we want to bring a championship to the city of Philadelphia. Okay? If you go win the World Series or compete for the World Series the next 5 years, do you care that you gave up Alfaro and Sanchez and whoever else?
Right.
You don't. You know why? Because you're winning baseball games. Because you get to go to the ballpark every night with a chance to do some damage. You have a good cast of characters around there right now that has a chance to do some really fun things. And Realmuto fits in with their age-wise. He fits position-wise. He fits leadership-wise. He fits in a million different ways and makes that team better, and it's absolutely a fair trade. The Marlins held out for a long time for a lot of different assets and for a lot of things I thought they were crazy for. And you know what? They got what they wanted. Good for them. They had a trade chip, go back to that Giancarlo Stanton deal, right? And they started moving the eventual National League MVP and Christian Yelich and Stanton and everybody else that could play. They held on to this one because the Marlins are in a rebuild completely top to bottom, tear it all down mode and go forward. But the Phillies got a good deal here. Yes, they gave up a lot, but they got a good deal here. Realmuto's a proven product in the major leagues, going to catch every day, and as long as he stays healthy, good Lord willing, and there's a lot of really good things to help that club move forward, to go get another piece like Harper or Machado, which tell me they're not screaming for that one, because I know they are.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay? Harper or Machado, one of the two. They just want one of them. It doesn't matter which one.
Just want one. Yeah, I don't care. Pick one.
I think one of the things that you mentioned a little bit ago, like when you sign the Harper, the Machado, the A-Rod, the Stanton, whatever it is, and then you don't add the pieces around them to make sure that huge, what looks like a bloated contract actually ultimately ends up being worth it. You got to go spend some more assets to make your team better. Well, Realmuto is one of those assets, even though you didn't have to give him 5 years and $100 million. And not only that, but he's only costing you, about $6 million this year? And if he goes to arbitration next year without a multi-year deal, what's that going to be, about $10 million, $12 million maximum? So you're getting a star for basically 2 years and $18 million over the next 2 years in exchange for Sanchez, Stewart, and Alfaro. Like, if you were to add Machado or Bryce Harper to the mix now, I don't want to say it's a completed roster, but it's pretty darn close, and now you're just looking for ancillary pieces. You're looking for the Marwin Gonzalez's or the relief pitchers that are still out there on the market to kind of complete your World Series roster. I mean, they kind of have in Realmuto a kind of a built-in big-time free agent signing that would go with a Manny Machado or a Bryce Harper.
You got to believe that, on the back of that, too, they're going to work to sign him long-term, right?
Sure, yep.
You got to believe on that. And they just, love or hate the Aaron Nola contract, they just extended him too.
Yep.
Right? So they take care of that deal. So they're firmly securing the window here, fellas. I mean, and that's what I think people got to remember. There's a window the Phillies are keeping open that they're trying to make happen for a long time. They're not trying to do this for a year or two. This wasn't a trade for 2019. This is a trade for 2024. You got guys that you're trying to build all the way through that and keep that window open and win. The Astros have done a good job of that with people that left those pieces here before they got here and augmenting what Jeff Luhnow and company have done, augmenting at the big league level because they did a great job of that, right? They've done a good job of putting those two together and keeping that window open. It's exactly what the Phillies are doing. They got young, affordable players and money to spend that's been saved up over time, and they're putting it in their players, putting it into their club, and Real Muto helps them do that. He does it in the toughest position in baseball to fill. He does that at a very, very high level. He does it in ways that will change that organization, allow other pieces to come. It's a win for the city of Philadelphia, and it's a win for the Phillies. Period.
Looking forward to the NL East this year. It's actually going to be super competitive. The Marlins are the only team in that division that has no shot to make the postseason. I think you can argue every other club in that division has a legit shot at least a wild card, if not to win the division. So looking forward to that. Let's talk about windows a little bit more here. The Mariners had an interesting offseason, and we've talked a lot of Mariners together, Jeremy, because that's the team you worked for, and that's the city I live in. The Mariners are in my backyard. They've had a really interesting winter. I traded 2 years of Zunino for 4 years of Malik Smith. They traded 2 years of Paxton for Sheffield, Swanson, and Thompson Williams. They traded Diaz, Cano, and Cash for Dunn, Kellenic, Bruce, Swarzak, Gerson, Bautista, Alex Colomé for Omar Narvaez. Segura went to Philly for Carlos Santana and J.P. Crawford. They traded Santana and Cash to Cleveland for Encarnacion and a comp pick. They've done a lot of stuff. Gamble and Zavalos went to Milwaukee for Domingo Santana, and then they signed Yusei Kikuchi and Hunter Strickland. It's been very busy, which isn't the surprise with Jerry Dipoto. He's been busy since he's been here. That's the kind of general manager that he is. But it's year one of what the club wants fans to believe is a very, very short rebuild, and they won't even use the word rebuild. I really think it's more like a kind of a 3-year thing. Maybe they needed to tear it down even further and go 5 years, but I'm curious where you stand on the job Jerry Dipoto has done in year one, kicking off this retooling here in Seattle.
You know, I think that I got to pat those guys on the back a little bit. You know, I take a step back and obviously, you know, with what we did when we were there and what Jerry's done since then, he's done some really good things to give them the core to take a step back and go a couple steps forward when the time is right. Right. I don't know that how long their window is going to be open, because I think it goes a lot further than what they've done so far. I do know the Seattle Mariners in particular are in position to be good for a while after this next, 2019 and 2020. I don't think it's tomorrow. I think it's 2021. And I think they have a chance to rebuild some capital, right, that they put in other places, and let some other stuff come off the books and make some better decisions for the future with when they know what they have. But right now, they've gotten players that help them be better, be good sooner rather than later, instead of being all the way of a teardown. I think they're a long ways from competing in the AL West, if that's really where we're going with this, right? But then again, you look at that division as a whole, and the Houston Astros seem to be set up as long as they can fill their holes for the next couple of years. 2, 3, 4, maybe, right? As long as they can fill their holes. So I think the Mariners have done what they need to do to give themselves a chance to retool properly and grow and go forward. A lot of this is going to depend on what they do in the draft as well. And
that's where you aren't a fan of Jerry Dipoto and the Mariners right now. Yeah, I don't think you really ever complained a whole lot about Jerry Dipoto, the general manager at the major league level, kind of making do with what he has. I think that, with you, if I'm remembering our conversations, both here on the air and, in text and all that, has really been about, can the guy draft and develop? And where I sit is, I don't know the answer to that question. I think you sit a little stronger on the not really.
I'm on the side. This guy is the right guy to build a major league club. That's where I'm at. And so far, even again, for identifying guys and going forward, I don't see how he's not the right guy to add to what you have and replace people with trades, right? I mean, look, there's like a trade that isn't a trade that goes down, Jason, anywhere in the universe that Jerry Dipoto doesn't have his fingerprint on somehow. I mean, it doesn't matter where it is. The guy might as well be called Transaction Dipoto. Like, it's amazing.
I haven't heard that one.
How many trades he goes through. But I will tell you that when it comes to the system, when it comes to putting people in place to develop, when it comes to to drafting, man, I'm just not ecstatic with the track record. And he's had a lot of it. Like, it's not like this is a new guy that's new GM, man. This is what he was a interim GM in Arizona, correct?
Yep.
He was the GM in Anaheim.
4 years.
He was the GM, right? The GM in Seattle. Now this will be year 4. 16, this is year 4. So it's not like it's a new run there. And in the meantime, he's done stuff in Boston, really good on the pro side, right? He did some stuff in Colorado before that, depending who you ask, was either really good or really not. And I don't know. And obviously, he's a former player, so he's got the pedigree you would want to be in the position that he's in. Unbelievably smart guy and exceptional feel for what he's doing. But the draft and develop part, man, I got to tell you, I don't buy into the notion, and I'll say it this way because I don't know all the people in the organization. I hope this isn't the consensus anymore, but I will say this. I don't buy into the notion that players are what they are when you draft them. I don't ever buy into that. Players stop developing in the big leagues many times. Right. Because every time you get there, you're still growing and developing. Your job in development in the draft is to find players who not only are good today, but have a long way ahead of them before they're ever going to hit their ceiling. And that doesn't mean – that can mean 17, that can mean 21, whenever you take them. And obviously in Latin America, that sometimes means the age of 4. Okay? At this situation, you need to be able to find players and develop them and let them grow, have roadmaps, and continue to rise through the system so that they're still learning in the big league level. That's how you're going to win. I don't know that I've seen him be able to do that.
I think we for sure have not seen that happen under Jerry Dipoto anywhere at this point. I guess the question now is it just drafting? Is it drafting and developing? Is it something that a general manager can actually get significantly better at as he moves along? Because a lot of this is, choosing the general plan. How are we going to attack developing our own players? And not just drafting, but the LATAM signings, international over in the Asian countries, things of that nature, and then picking the right people and putting them in place with that plan, or doing it vice versa, picking the people and saying, hey, what should our plan be? Most people in baseball would tell you Jerry's just telling everybody what to do. I think this past year proved that actually isn't happening. And that's actually new for Jerry Dipoto to not actually be this dictator. No assistant general manager, here's what you're going to do. No scouting director, here's what you're going to do. It really sounds to me like people have Jerry's ear a little bit, and maybe that's going to point him in the right direction. But I guess that is a question. He's been a GM for 8+ years. Can a guy like that in his position, while he's focused on so many different things, 365 days a year, actually get better to the point, at drafting and developing to the point where it makes a significant difference in the organization? We talked about this in one of the last podcasts we did, right?
We talked about this. We talked about, Jerry, I said, and you'll have the clip somewhere, but the point was that Jerry doesn't have people around him. He has yes men around him. He has people around him that will push back a little bit and give him their opinion. And I don't believe that you can surround yourself be successful without people with different ideas. Right. I deal with it every day with the Future Star Series in a bunch of different areas. And if you don't have people that are going to challenge you, you're not going to get any better because you're only listening to yourself.
Right.
And, if he's made that switch, then good for him.
I think at least a little bit. To what extent, I don't know. That's difficult to tell. I'm obviously not in that front office, but we used to hear the stories of Billy Beane and Theo Epstein, for Dave Dombrowski for years. And you know what? I was sitting in my office and Joe Schmo came up with this thought and said, hey, you got a second? And we came up with this idea and then we thought, yeah, let's go do this. And you're like, okay, these guys are collaborators. Like, yes, it's ultimately on him, but these guys are collaborators. I mean, those are famous stories about Theo Epstein. When an agent for a free agent goes and talks to the Red Sox, there are 11 guys in the room and they're all engaging in the conversations and they're all involved and their opinion matters. When you go to Seattle, you're talking to one guy. That was the story, not only with Jerry, but with Jack early on. But with Jerry, I think that's changed a little bit. And we started to hear some stories about how, hey, that trade with Tampa wouldn't have come together if Jerry wasn't listening to some of the young people he's brought on to contribute to their baseball operations department. And they went out and made that deal. And that was the Denard Span, Alex Colomé deal early in, in May. I think it's changing. I just think the question is how much? How far will he allow that to go? and what kind of a difference does that make in terms of drafting and development? Because now he's got his guy at scouting director. Remember, year one, it was still Tom McNamara with Jerry here. It's been Scott Hunter for the last couple of years. So I guess we'll see. He's got his guy here. I'm not sure if he really had his guy in Anaheim or not, but I guess we'll see. That's why I'm in. The jury is out on that portion of what Jerry Dipoto can or can't do. But you're right. The track record says no, but do I just stick with the track record, or do I kind of sit back and watch?
Yeah, you know what? I think that he's earned the right. And man, look, this is not fun to say because drafting and developing is obviously pretty close to my heart. Right?
Sure.
I feel like he's earned the right with what he's done to retool the big league roster. And man, that Andrew Moore trade was a great trade. All I can tell you is get into Tampa Bay. It was outstanding. I don't know what took so long.
Best trade ever made in your mind, right?
Best on the play. I don't know what the deal was.
$20,000 for Babe Ruth, but you got something for Andrew Moore? Significantly better. Yeah.
You got a cup of coffee. You got a piece of sugar, whatever. Sugar. There you go. On a backpack. You see your backpack. Anyway, bottom line is, to me, that was a great trade, and he's done a good job. So because he's done a good job of putting them in a position to compete with prospects or guys that maybe their development can get something out of at the big league level sooner rather than later, he's earned the right to see if he can continue to draft. Okay, I'm not sold yet, and it's going to take me a minute before I see some guys really develop.
Sure.
Some guys have been hurt, can't hold them against injuries. That happens, right? Especially position players. Some guys have their development slowed, and there are some successes. There seem to be some wins beginning to come out, here and there. So let's see what happens with him. But for now, I will say he's earned the right to have this conversation and to go forward. Yeah. I think Jerry Dipoto ultimately will help you win a World Series if he's given the ammunition to do so. And I'm going to say that again, if he's given the ammunition to do so.
Right.
But that's at the big league level. I'm just not sure, but I think he's earned the right.
Right. Interesting. It's going to be fun. They obviously improved their farm system this winter and did it in a hurry. Went from the very, very bottom of the league, no matter whose rankings you want to look at or how you want to put this together, to probably somewhere in between 15 and 20 in the league. So they're creeping up a little closer to respectability there, and that's obviously going to help them make some decisions down the line. As far as their window to win, whether you believe I don't believe it's 2020 at all either. Whether you believe it's 2021 or 2022, whatever. Where is the window in terms of where the other clubs are in the American League West? Because in the end, you'll get some wild card clubs that will threaten or go to the World Series. It has happened once or twice, but generally you got to win your division to win the World Series. The Houston Astros won their division, won the World Series. The Boston Red Sox won the East, they win the West. That's generally what happens in Major League Baseball, even with the wild cards. So for the Mariners to put themselves in a position in a couple of years, where does that window start as you look at where the Angels are, where the Astros are? The Rangers are rebuilding right now too, on the same timeline, at least as tearing it down as the Mariners are. The Oakland A's might be the wild card here, but where is everybody else? Where does that window actually start to open for clubs that are rebuilding right now in the American League West?
The window starts to open depending solely on what happens in Houston with the free agents that they're going to have coming up, right? Mm-hmm. And we look at the big league club, and I'll talk about this tonight here in Houston on TV a little later, but you look at the big league club, and they signed Wade Miley, right? Mm-hmm. They lost McCullers, who should have been a reliever the entire time. I don't care what anybody says. The guy's a reliever, okay? I'm tired of this conversation. Sorry. No personal. I'm tired of that conversation.
I get it.
Should have been a reliever, okay? And you have Keuchel, who's a free agent, and you have Charlie Morton, who signed in Tampa Bay, okay? So returning, you've got Garrett Cole and Justin Verlander, not necessarily in that order. Mm-hmm. And you've got Wade Miley that's going to step into the rotation, who did a good job in Milwaukee last year, but still, it's not Keuchel, okay, who's going to step into that rotation. And you've got Colin McHugh, who's going to fill a spot for now.
And then a bunch of young guys.
Then you have Forrest Whitley, and then you have Josh James, and you have whoever else is going to step into that 5 role. And that's a really different look than a club that could run out the last 2 years and say we have the best or one of the best staffs in baseball, right? So that's a little bit different now. And you have Marwin Gonzalez, who filled in a lot of roles, and Altuve was hurt, and Correa was hurt, and very productive type of guy, man. He's fun to watch and fun to be around.
And they've essentially replaced him with Elidmus Diaz, who isn't as versatile and isn't going to hit for as much power and may just not be as good a player.
He's not a good player. He's Marwin Gonzalez light. And then you have a catching situation now that seems to be a little bit of a revolving door. And you've got some other pop that's come off the bench. So what the Astros do with the Springer, with Correa, with Bregman, with Altuve, with that window, right, with the guys around him, Gurriel's getting older, Reddick is getting a little older. I mean, the guys that are around him is going to dictate the window of everybody else. The Rangers are miles away. The A's, you can never really count them out, man, but I didn't think they were going to do last year what they did. So, I mean, we'll see what's going to happen there. And the Mariners and Rangers are on similar tracks. The wild card is the Angels. And I use wild card, no pun intended, because Shohei Ohtani, you can see what we get out of him really in 2020, right?
Right.
And you've got Mike Trout, whose contract is going to come up soon.
Too soon if you're an Angels fan. They're fighting right now because it would have made sense for the Angels to do exactly what the Mariners are doing this winter. Pick a Trout, trade everybody else that isn't under club control for 3+ years. Rebuild, look at 2020, but they couldn't do it because in 2 years, Mike Trout's going to ultimately either be traded or he's going to sign with another club after the season in free agency. And if I'm Trout at this point, I've already decided I don't want to stay here. This isn't for me. I'm going to get closer to home and go back to the East Coast. We're fine. I'll make money wherever I'm playing. But the Angels are doing what the Mariners have done the last couple of years and trying to hang on to the roster and make do with what they have, but for a different reason, mostly because they're trying to keep Mike Trout. I look at this division, and you being close to the Astros there. To me, where that window opens up is probably 2021 because Justin Verlander and Garrett Cole, free agents after 2019. And I don't know that. I mean, you and I have been talking, and it doesn't sound like they're going to give anybody big money to stay there, let alone a 37-year-old Justin Verlander or Garrett Cole, who's probably already knows he's going to play for the Angels or the Dodgers in 2 years. So
see, I think you're indicative right there. What you're seeing this offseason is indicative of what they're going to do going forward. And because you're not signing a Marwin Gonzalez or Dallas Keuchel to extend your window, you're keeping your 4 or 5 players around there. Again, Altuve is Altuve, right? And Bregman, these guys are there. But there's other pieces to help. You saw it last year. They didn't get through the Red Sox, right? Red Sox beat them. Mm-hmm. They didn't get there because there's other pieces who are involved with helping a club win. You can't do it with 1 or 2 guys, right? So Keuchel and Gonzalez not being signed, 2 really big holes that fit really big needs. You're seeing, in my mind, what they're going to do going forward. You're seeing the Verlander and the Cole and the Springer discussions happening right now in front of your eyes, right now. Okay? They paid Altuve. You got to figure they're going to pay Correa or Bregman, one of the 2.
Right.
Not both, which means they're not going to pay Springer. Reddick's going to come off the books. You got Milton Bradley, who's a good fit for right now, and you've got some other holes that are going to come open. And what happens next year when Cole and Verlander are now not on the roster anymore? What happens then?
Right. That's a completely different team. If you just take one of those guys out of there, maybe they still win the division, but they're not winning 100 games. So if you take them both off that roster heading into 2020, like what do they got? What are their options to make sure Forrest Whitley is an ace by then? Like that's why I see 2021 being the year where that division might be wide open. I mean, Houston's still going to be talented. It's not like they're going to be bad, but what are they, you go look at the free agent market, like what else is there? And if they're not going to spend on Verlander and Cole, why should we believe they're going to spend on somebody else that hits a free agent market? I mean, Patrick Corbin was not part of their conversations this winter. It doesn't even sound like Dallas Keuchel, so far at least, has been a serious part of their conversations because he wants 5 years. So 2021 might be the time that a club like Texas or Seattle or Oakland can kind of pounce and take the division. Maybe it only takes 95 wins to win the division at that particular point because it's taken over 100 the last couple of years.
I mean, so much happened so quick in this game, but I got to believe the Astros, and we've talked about it before, 2019, they might have the best record, certainly in the West, maybe in baseball, based on what they got. We'll see what's going around, right? Regular season record, just because of the division parity and how they're going to play. How many the way the schedule is going to be weighted and how many games are going to play against they're the clubs in the division like every year. But their window for me is over. It's open right now for competitiveness, but it's over for winning World Series unless they start doing some things. The Yankees are good. Man, I got to tell you, you talked about the National League East. That's going to be a slugfest. Yeah. The Brewers are good for a while.
Yep.
Okay.
There's 3 competitive teams in the Central too. Yep.
Right. I mean, you're telling me the Astros are better when it comes time to a 7-game series than the rest of those clubs out there? I don't think so. Not today. And so what I'm saying is, as you look at the rest of what they're going to do, the window does start for me in 2021 when all those guys are gone. And then you've got Texas, who should be in a better spot. And maybe by then Mike Trout says, hey, you know what, man? I got Dallas Keuchel pitching next to me. I got Justin Verlander, who lives in L.A. with his wife. You may have heard of her, Kate Upton, and a baby now. Okay? I've got Garrett Cole, who grew up 4 seconds from Anaheim Stadium. Okay? Maybe that's where I'm going. Maybe not. However, you're in a situation where those two teams those teams in the West, Padres might be one, and the Dodgers might be one, because they're always going to be good, right? The way they keep spending money. They seem to be good for a while. And you got the Angels. You have a situation, maybe Mike Trout does stay in Anaheim. I agree with you. I think he's gone as it sits today. But you put Keuchel next to him, you get a healthy Ohtani, you go get Garrett Cole or Verlander, one of the two.
That changes it. That changes the conversation. Absolutely changes the conversation. And you got to think that that's their goal. But the fact that that's not the Astros' goal is the bigger story, really. I mean, Trout's great and everything, but that does open that window in a couple of years. And really interesting. And we're starting to run out of time here a little bit. I don't want to keep you too much longer, but it looks like, most people agree it's the Astros, then the A's in the AL West this year, at least talent-wise, then followed by the Angels, Mariners, and Rangers in some order, probably the Angels third. Things change next year. And things change in 2021 when clubs like Seattle and Texas might actually be ready to win. Like you said at the outset of that conversation, that part of the conversation there, the Angels end up being the wild card. Do they go out and do something with Cole or Verlander and get Trout to stay? It's going to be really interesting. All right, before I let you go, I actually have 6 quick things, and they are quick things. The first 3 are actually listener questions. Actually, it's just 2. It's just 2 questions, so it's going to be 5 things. And then a couple of predictions from you that we will give you a chance to change your mind on the next time we talk before the regular season starts. Let's start with the questions. One from Paul. Why would the Padres want Bryce Harper? Does that really make them legitimate contenders?
So Eric Hosmer notwithstanding, and of course Will Myers, right, which is a contract that's going to start picking up some money here. Padres in a position where they got one of the best farm systems in the game and some players they think that are really ready. Okay, ready to start helping, ready to start contributing. And Bryce Harper, at 26 years old, fits a mold for them in a great city to play in. It's close to his home, where they can give him a long-term contract. Preller's not going to be afraid of that. At least I don't think he is. And help those players grow into a powerhouse for quite some time while they have some cost-effective, and I cringe when I say this word, but it is what it is, assets. And so the Padres, to me, make some sense. Makes some sense for Bryce Harper, makes some sense for them, because Bryce is going to, if he doesn't win in 19, doesn't win in 20, by 2021, those kids should be really ready to help and win for a long time if they're as good as they think they are. So, AJ is going to bet on the fact that Harper can change the franchise and help those kids grow up and bring some energy there. Absolutely.
AJ Preller himself, and maybe the ownership is a different story, but if AJ Preller is afraid of a Bryce Harper contract, I wonder what made him go to Eric Hosmer and say, hey, how about 8 and 144, buddy? Yikes. Anyway, all right, we'll move on. So that would be interesting. That would certainly make things interesting if Harper or Manny Machado went to the Padres. All right, second question's from, there were actually 4 questions, but they all kind of rolled into 2, so I stopped. This one's from Joel and Pat. What organization is in the best position to make the biggest jump in 2019? Looking back to last year, there were some clubs that, either underperformed or they've made significant moves this offseason to put them in a better position. Which one or 2 stand out for you looking ahead to this season?
The jury's out for me still a little bit, because these guys are going to get somebody, but the Phillies is one. Okay. Right. And I'm going to answer this 3 ways, because there's 3 clubs, and the Mets are another, who've done a lot of really good things to help their club get better. And the third one would be the White Sox, again, depending on what they add. Still, the White Sox and the Phillies are going to add somebody else. But right now, my pick is the Phillies or the Mets in that very, very dangerous and very, very fun to watch National League East. Right? Phillies put themselves in a position to win the division and go further into the playoffs, and they're not done yet. They're just not done yet. Right? These guys seem to be on a mission. So for where they were last year, which was good, but we talked about them, I think, at the same time, Jason, same podcast, right? A little further away.
Yep.
We talked about the Braves being a little ahead of that, and the Phillies being, a couple years away still at the time, where they weren't ready to contribute and really win. Now with the additions that they've had, they are ready to win. And I think those guys have a chance to be fun for a little while. So the Phillies, for me, is the team.
Yeah, that's good. I'd probably go with the Mets just because I look at last year and they were awful, and I think they have a legitimate chance to win 90 or more games this year. So I think the win improvement might actually be more with the Mets than with the Phillies. But you're right, the Phillies might be able to jump from second place in the East with mid-80s wins to World Series champion. That's obviously a much more meaningful leap than the number of wins. All right, we're going to finish this out. We're going to play a quick game of If You Had to Bet. So we're in Vegas. We're at the Bellagio or whatever your favorite casino in Vegas is, and you have to make a bet. If you had to bet, where are you putting your money in the Bryce Harper sweepstakes?
Am I working for MLB or not working?
You are not. You are Jeremy Booth. Do I need to run through all your titles again?
No, I apologize. I mean, just with the gambling stuff coming, I was just curious if I was able to pick. Anyway, my thing with Bryce Harper. I'm picking Philadelphia.
Okay.
And I'm saying that because it's further away from where he lives, right? But he's obviously no stranger to the East Coast.
Sure.
I don't see the Giants as a legitimate fit long term, although they may have a lot of money. I think the Padres are a real contender. But I put Bryce Harper in Philadelphia because Bryce Harper is going to want to win. And that city is going to love how he plays, which is all out all the time. That city is going to respect his mouth, which is, you know what? That's because they like that type of fire.
Yep.
He's going to be a fit there. He's going to grind it out. He's going to spit nails. He's going to do everything he can. He's going to be really productive with a good cast of characters around him. He's going to want to win for a while. I think Bryce Harper ends up in Philadelphia.
All right, same question. If you had to bet, where are you putting your money in the Manny Machado sweepstakes?
Answer it this way. From the beginning, I thought those two had a chance. People thought I was nuts to end up in the same place, depending where that ended up. It could have been San Diego. It could have been the Giants. Now, if you get both Machado and Harper in San Francisco, it's a different story, but you can't afford them both, right? So assuming that's not the case with a team that's going to win, I'm putting Machado in Chicago because I believe that he's got enough people around him to make that environment fun as well. I think Machado's going to have a good time. I think Chicago White Sox are a little bit more laid back with how they approach the game. I think if Machado's running a ground ball, they're not necessarily going to boo him as long as it's a double the next time that he's up the plate. So
right. I
feel like Machado's a fit in Chicago. I do. Now, in a different climate somewhere else, but today – with Jose Abreu and Yonder Alonso and some of those guys that are there, I think he ends up in Chicago.
That's a really good fit when you look at Manny Machado putting up numbers too. Like I made the tweet yesterday about it'd be fun if, and I know they're not in on him, but it'd be fun if Bryce Harper landed in Colorado with the Rockies. That'd make them really fun to watch. But I think the same thing can be said for Machado with the White Sox. It's going to be a young team, but he's only 26 too. Slide him in at third base there and let him hit in that ballpark. Yeah, that'd be a lot of fun for a lot of years. All right, one final if you had to bet. It is February 13th today as we record this. You will get another shot on this here podcast and on all the outlets that you have to change your mind and amend your pick. But assuming that those two things occur, Manny Machado goes to the White Sox, Bryce Harper goes to the Phillies. If you had to bet, who wins the World Series in 2019?
Philadelphia Phillies.
Philadelphia. So they sign Bryce Harper and immediately get rewarded. Boy, that would go a long way to suggesting to clubs, hey, you know what? Spending money works.
That's right, and with the pieces they've added around him, again, in anticipation of him getting there, right? The pieces they've added around him, these guys are dangerous and they're going to be a lot of fun. Today, assuming the things happen that we just talked about, Bryce Harper's a Philly.
That is the voice of Jeremy Booth. That'll do it for this episode of Baseball Things. Thanks to Jeremy for joining us. Thanks to Baseball for existing. Thank you, Steve Sandmeyer. Thanks to all the thingers that make this possible. I'm Jason Churchill. Peace.
Look, talent comes everywhere, but having something to say and a way to say it so people listen to it, that's a whole other bag. And unless you get out there and you try to do it, you'll never know. That's just the truth. If there's one reason we're supposed to be here is to say something so people want to hear it. So you got to grab it. And you don't apologize. You don't worry about why they're listening or how long they're going to be listening for. You just tell them what you want to say. Don't you understand what I'm trying to tell you?